Commander Zara Khan stood at attention in the gleaming halls of the Galactic Defense Academy. Her purple skin shimmered under the artificial sunlight that filtered through the crystalline ceiling. At 7 feet tall with 4 muscular arms, she was the pride of the Vorthak Empire. She had graduated top of her class from the most prestigious military academy in the known galaxy. Her record was perfect, undefeated in over 300 combat simulations, victor in 47 real battles across different star systems. Today marked a new chapter. The Galactic Council had announced something unprecedented. For the first time in history, they would allow humans to participate in the elite training program. Zara Khan's mandibles clicked in amusement. Humans, those soft pink creatures from that backwater planet called Earth. She had seen the reports. Average height barely reaching 6 feet, only 2 arms. Fragile skin that could be pierced by the smallest blade. No natural armor, no claws, no enhanced senses. The other elite soldiers gathered in the training hall shared her skepticism. There was Kator from the Reptilian Confederacy, his scales harder than most metals. Beside him stood the twins from Centauri Prime, their telepathic abilities making them formidable in any battle. And of course there was Drex, the 8-foot giant from the heavy-gravity world of Maxima. His single punch could shatter concrete. "I heard they need special suits just to survive in standard gravity," Kator hissed, his forked tongue tasting the air. "How can such weak beings even qualify for elite training?" Zara Khan nodded in agreement. "Politics," she said with disdain. "The council wants to appear inclusive. They'll wash out within the first week." The massive doors to the training hall slid open with a pneumatic hiss. 5 humans walked in. Zara Khan studied them with her 4 eyes, each capable of seeing in different spectrums. They looked even more pathetic in person. The tallest among them barely reached her shoulder. They wore simple black uniforms that offered no protection, no visible weapons, no impressive physical features. The lead human was a female with short dark hair and brown skin. She moved with a strange economy of motion that Zara Khan couldn't quite place. Behind her walked 4 others, 2 males and 2 females of varying skin tones. They spread out slightly as they entered, their eyes scanning the room in a way that seemed almost casual. Grand Marshal Tekvar, the Academy's commandant, entered behind them. His 6 arms were crossed in the traditional gesture of authority. "Elite soldiers," his voice boomed across the hall, "meet your new training partners. These are Earth's representatives for the program." One of the Centauri twins laughed telepathically, the sound echoing in everyone's minds. "Partners? They look more like prey animals." The human female at the front turned her head slightly. A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the vast space. "We're looking forward to training with you." Drex took a thundering step forward. "Training? You mean watching? Surely you don't expect to actually participate in our exercises." Captain Chen's smile widened slightly. "We're here to train, same as you." The first test was scheduled immediately. Standard protocol for new arrivals. A basic combat readiness assessment. The arena materialized around them, hard light projectors creating a rocky terrain with scattered cover. The rules were simple. 5 versus 5. Non-lethal weapons only. Last team standing wins. Zara Khan hefted her plasma staff, its energy field crackling with restrained power. Her team spread out in perfect formation. Kator took the high ground, his natural climbing abilities giving him the advantage. The Centauri twins linked minds, creating an unbreakable communication network. Drex simply stood in the open, his massive frame serving as both shield and battering ram. The humans huddled together briefly. Zara Khan's enhanced hearing picked up fragments of their conversation, but the terms made no sense. "Overwatch. Crossfire. Dynamic entry." Military gibberish from a species that had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. The starting horn blared. Zara Khan charged forward, her forearms allowing her to maintain perfect balance while wielding her weapon. She expected the humans to scatter in fear. Instead, they moved with surprising coordination. Two of them sprinted to the sides while the others dropped behind cover. The first surprise came when Kator's position was compromised. The reptilian warrior had climbed to a perfect vantage point, or so it seemed, but the humans had anticipated it. One of them, a lean male with Asian features, had circled around through terrain Kator had dismissed as impassable. The human's shots were precise, catching Kator in a crossfire with another human who had remained hidden. Kator's shields flared and failed. He was out. "Impossible!" Zara Khan growled. She redirected her charge toward the human positions. Her species was known for their speed and strength. She could cover the distance in seconds. That's when she learned about human grenades. The small device rolled to a stop at her feet. Her warrior instincts screamed danger. She leaped backward, her powerful legs propelling her away just as the flashbang detonated. Even with her eyes closed, the sensory overload was overwhelming. Her four eyes, each adapted to different wavelengths, were all blinded simultaneously. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Drex roar. The giant was engaging the humans in close combat. Finally, she thought, in melee range, human fragility would be their downfall. The sounds that followed challenged that assumption. Drex's roars turned to grunts of surprise, then pain. When Zara Khan's vision cleared, she saw something that defied logic. Captain Chen had somehow gotten inside Drex's reach. The human female was using Drex's own momentum against him, redirecting his massive strength with minimal effort. Each time Drex swung his huge fists, Chen would shift slightly, guiding the attacks past her while delivering precise strikes to what seemed like random points on his body. But they weren't random. Zara Khan realized with growing alarm that the human was targeting nerve clusters, joint weaknesses, and pressure points that shouldn't be vulnerable on a Maxima native. How did she know Drex's anatomy that well? The Centauri twins tried to use their telepathic abilities to confuse the humans, projecting false images and phantom sounds. But the humans had clearly prepared for this too. They moved in pairs, constantly checking each other's positions, using hand signals and verbal confirmations to verify what was real. When one twin created an illusory wall of fire, the humans simply threw a rock through it and continued advancing when it passed harmlessly through. Zara Khan found herself alone, her entire team eliminated in less than 5 minutes. She gripped her plasma staff tighter. She was Zara Khan, warrior elite of the Vorthak Empire. She would not fall to these primitives. The humans surrounded her, moving with that same strange coordination. They didn't attack immediately. Instead, they waited, weapons raised but not firing, testing her, analyzing her stance, her grip, the way her weight shifted. She attacked with all her skill, her forearms allowing combinations impossible for most species. The plasma staff whirled in complex patterns, creating a deadly sphere of energy around her. But the humans didn't engage directly. They danced around her attacks, always just out of reach, forcing her to expend energy chasing shadows. Then she understood. They were letting her tire herself out. These supposedly weak humans were using endurance as a weapon. Her powerful muscles, designed for explosive action, were burning through energy reserves at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, the humans maintained a steady, sustainable pace. When she finally slowed, chest heaving with exertion, they struck. Not with overwhelming force, but with coordinated precision. One human fainted high, drawing her attention. Another slid low, tangling her legs. A third targeted her weapon arm, applying pressure to a nerve that made her grip loosen. The plasma staff clattered across the ground. Captain Chen approached, her weapon lowered but ready. "Yield?" she asked simply. Zara Khan's pride warred with reality. She was on the ground, disarmed, surrounded. The weakness she had perceived in humans had been a dangerous misconception. They weren't weak. They were different. They had taken millions of years of evolution as persistence hunters and refined it into military doctrine. "I yield," Zara Khan said, the words bitter on her tongue. The simulation ended. The arena dissolved back into the training hall. Medical drones swooped in to check the defeated aliens, though the humans had been remarkably precise in their non-lethal takedowns. Grand Marshal Thekvar's expression was unreadable. "Interesting," was all he said. As Zara Khan picked herself up, she caught Captain Chen's eye. The human offered a hand to help her stand. After a moment's hesitation, Zara Khan took it, surprised by the strength in the grip. "How?" Zara Khan asked. "My analysis showed humans have minimal combat capabilities." Chen's expression was serious now. "Your analysis was based on our physical limitations, but humans don't fight with just our bodies. We fight with our minds. We studied every species in this program, your strengths, your weaknesses, your tactics. We prepared counters for everything. But the Centauri twins' telepathy. We've been dealing with deception in warfare for thousands of years. Misdirection, camouflage, psychological operations. Telepathy is just another form of information warfare." Zara Khan felt a chill run down her spine. These humans had defeated them not through superior strength or speed or natural weapons. They had won through preparation, adaptation, and teamwork. They had turned their weaknesses into strengths. "This was just the introduction," Chen continued. "The real training starts tomorrow." As the humans left the hall, Zara Khan noticed something she had missed before. The way they moved, always maintaining sight lines to each other. The way they automatically checked corners and kept their hands free. The constant, subtle communication between them. These weren't just soldiers. They were persistence predators who had evolved beyond the need for claws and fangs. They had developed something far more dangerous, the ability to think, plan, and adapt faster than any other species in the galaxy. For the first time in her military career, Zara Khan felt uncertain. If this was what humans considered a basic demonstration, what would they be capable of when they truly tried? She had come here believing humans were weak. The truth was far more terrifying. They weren't weak at all. They were just getting started. The next morning arrived with a crimson dawn bleeding through the Academy's atmospheric shields. Zara Khan had spent the night researching human military history. What she found disturbed her more than any battlefield horror she had witnessed. Humans didn't just wage war. They revolutionized it. Every few decades, they completely reimagined combat, from phalanxes to gunpowder, from trench warfare to nuclear weapons, from conventional armies to guerrilla tactics. They adapted faster than any species the galaxy had ever encountered. She found herself in the mess hall, her 4 eyes scanning data pads while mechanically consuming her morning rations. Around her, other elite soldiers whispered about yesterday's defeat. The shame was palpable. 5 of the galaxy's finest warriors defeated by a species most considered barely civilized. "They cheated," Kator insisted, his scales still showing the mottled pattern of embarrassment. "They must have. No species can know that much about our anatomy without inside information." "They didn't cheat," Zara Khan said quietly. "I checked the archives. Humans have something called medical exchange programs with over 40 species. They trade healing knowledge. But what they really do is map every weakness, every vulnerability." The table fell silent. Drex, sporting synthetic skin patches where Chen had struck nerve clusters, growled low in his throat. "Deceptive creatures." "No," a human voice interjected. "Strategic." They turned to see Lieutenant Jake Morrison, one of the humans from yesterday's exercise. He carried a tray of what looked like barely edible protein paste. The human sat down uninvited, seemingly unbothered by the hostile stares. "You think we're deceptive," Morrison said, taking a bite of his meal without flinching at what must have been awful taste. But every species here has been in conflict. The Vorthak conquered 17 systems. The Reptilian Confederacy fought a 100-year war with the Arcturans. The difference is humans study war like you study honor. We make it a science. War without honor is barbarism, Zara-Khan retorted. Morrison's laugh was sharp. Honor is a luxury for species with natural advantages. Humans had to face predators with sharper teeth, stronger muscles, better senses. We couldn't afford honor. We needed to survive. Before anyone could respond, the training alert echoed through the facility. Today's exercise, Endurance Course Alpha. Zara-Khan had run it dozens of times, 50 kilometers of brutal terrain, obstacle walls, energy barriers, and environmental hazards. The record was held by a Vorthak warrior who completed it in 3 hours. The aliens assembled at the starting line, their various physiological advantages on display. Kator's scales would protect him from the acidic rain in Sector 4. The Centauri twins could share the mental load, alternating who controlled their movements to rest their minds. Drex's massive stride would devour distance. The humans arrived wearing the same simple black uniforms. No powered armor, no enhancement drugs, no visible technology beyond basic hydration systems. Regulation check, Grand Marshal Tekvar announced. All participants must complete the course with standard kit only. No performance modifications allowed. Several aliens smirked. Standard kit for humans meant practically nothing. How could unenhanced human endurance compete with genetically perfected warriors? The starting signal flared. Zara-Khan launched forward with her usual explosive speed, her powerful legs driving her ahead of the pack. Kator scrambled up the first obstacle wall like it was flat ground. Drex simply smashed through barriers that others had to climb. The humans started at a jog. By kilometer 10, Zara-Khan was maintaining her lead, though her breathing had deepened. The first environmental hazard loomed, a field of electromagnetic interference that played havoc with most species' navigation organs. She relied on her secondary eyes to maintain direction, though the strain was significant. She glanced back, expecting to see the humans struggling far behind. Instead, they were maintaining the same steady pace, now running in a tight formation. They had tied cloth strips over their mouths and noses, breathing in a controlled rhythm. Kilometer 20 brought the gravity fluctuation zone, patches of artificially increased gravity that could triple body weight without warning. Zara-Khan's species had evolved on a high-gravity world, giving her an advantage. She powered through, though each step in the heavy zones felt like lifting mountains. Kator wasn't as fortunate. She passed him collapsed at the edge of a particularly severe gravity well, his lighter reptilian frame unable to cope with the sudden changes. Medical drones circled, ready to extract him if needed. The humans reached the zone and did something unexpected. Instead of powering through, they slowed down. One of them, a woman with pale skin and red hair, pulled out what looked like primitive weight measurements. She was actually testing each section before they entered, mapping the gravity fields. Smart, Zara-Khan admitted grudgingly, forcing herself to maintain pace. By kilometer 30, the real challenge began. This section simulated battlefield conditions, smoke that burned lungs, extreme temperature variations, sonic attacks that could disorient even the most focused warrior. Zara-Khan's natural advantages were less useful here. Her 4 eyes watered in the caustic smoke. Her sensitive hearing became a liability under sonic bombardment. She pushed through on pure will, her elite training taking over. Pain was temporary. Victory was eternal. The mantras of her warrior culture drove her forward. But something was wrong. The humans were gaining on her. Their steady, relentless pace hadn't changed since the beginning. While she had sprinted, slowed, struggled, and pushed, they had simply maintained their rhythm. Worse, they seemed to be speeding up. In the military history files, she had read about something called persistence hunting. Ancient humans would chase prey for hours, days even. Not fast enough to catch them in a sprint, but relentless enough to exhaust them. The prey would run in bursts, rest, run again. The humans would just keep coming, walking when needed, jogging when possible, never stopping. Now she was the prey. Kilometer 40 brought the water obstacle. A 2-kilometer swim through frigid liquid filled with training predators. Not lethal, but their bites would slow anyone down. Zara Khan's people were not natural swimmers, but her 4 arms gave her options. She dove in, ignoring the cold that immediately sapped her strength. Halfway across, something brushed her leg. She kicked out, driving away one of the predators. Another came from the left. She spun, fighting it off, losing precious energy with each encounter. The creatures seemed drawn to her thrashing movements, her desperate speed. Then the humans entered the water. But they didn't thrash. They swam with smooth, efficient strokes, creating minimal disturbance. Captain Chen was in the lead. Her movements so fluid she seemed part of the water itself. The predators investigated them briefly, then lost interest in prey that didn't act like prey. Zara Khan reached the far shore exhausted, her muscles screaming. 10 kilometers left. She could do this. She was Vorthak. She was elite. But her body was betraying her. Her species was built for explosive power, for decisive battles that lasted hours, not days. Every fiber of fast-twitch muscle in her body was depleted. She stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. Footsteps behind her, steady, rhythmic, inexorable. The humans passed her at kilometer 45. They weren't sprinting, they weren't gloating, they were simply running, their faces showing the strain, but their pace unchanged. As they passed, Captain Chen nodded respectfully, acknowledging Zara Khan's effort. That small gesture somehow made it worse. Zara Khan finished the course in 4 hours and 17 minutes. A respectable time for most species. But the humans had finished in 3 hours and 52 minutes. Not through speed or strength, but through efficiency and endurance. In the medical bay afterward, Zara Khan lay on a recovery bed, synthetic muscle enhancers working to repair the damage from her overexertion. The Centauri twins were in similar states, their shared consciousness having provided no advantage against simple, relentless endurance. Drex hadn't even finished, his massive frame requiring too much energy to sustain over such distances. Lieutenant Morrison appeared at her bedside. He looked tired but not devastated, sipping from a water bottle with added electrolytes. "You pushed too hard at the beginning," he observed, not unkindly. "I used my advantages," Zara Khan corrected, "speed and strength." "For a sprint, yes. But this wasn't a sprint. Humans learned long ago that most battles aren't won in the first charge. They're won by whoever can keep fighting when everyone else is exhausted." "Your species evolved as persistence hunters," Zara Khan said. "I read about it." Morrison nodded. "But it's more than evolution now. It's doctrine. Human military training emphasizes sustainable performance over peak performance. We can't match you in a dead sprint or a power lift, but we can outlast you. And in war, the last soldier standing wins." Over the following days, the training intensified. Combat scenarios that lasted not hours, but days. Supply line exercises where resources dwindled and only efficient consumption allowed survival. Psychological warfare simulations that tested mental endurance as much as physical. Each time, the pattern repeated. The alien soldiers would excel initially, their natural advantages giving them commanding leads. But as time wore on, as resources depleted, as exhaustion mounted, the humans would emerge, not dominant but enduring, not overwhelming but omnipresent. The evacuation drill was particularly revealing. The scenario: extract civilian populations from a combat zone while under constant attack. Most species focused on speed, Get in, grab civilians, get out. The humans took a different approach. They established supply lines, medical stations, and defensive positions. They moved fewer civilians per trip but maintained a constant flow. When other species' rapid extractions broke down under sustained enemy pressure, the human system kept functioning. "Why do you prepare for such long engagements?" Drex asked during a tactical review. "Surely decisive action is preferable." Captain Chen pulled up historical data. "Because humans rarely get to choose when a war ends. Our first global war was supposed to last months. It lasted years. Our second was meant to be prevented by the horrors of the first. It was worse. We learned that no matter how much you want a quick victory, the enemy gets a vote." She showed footage from human conflicts. Not the glorified propaganda most species produced, but raw battlefield recordings, soldiers fighting for days without sleep, cities under siege for months. Guerrilla conflicts lasting decades. Humans had turned suffering into strategy. "You plan for the worst case," Zara Khan observed. "We plan for reality," Chen corrected. "Every species here has superior physical capabilities, but wars aren't won by capability alone. They're won by will, and will is measured over time." The cybernetic warfare module proved this point dramatically. The Centauri twins, with their natural telepathy, seemed perfectly suited for electronic and mental warfare. They could process data streams that would overwhelm most minds, coordinate complex attacks across multiple systems simultaneously. But the humans didn't try to match their processing power. Instead, they introduced something called malware. Simple, self-replicating programs that did nothing dramatic. They just persisted. While the twins focused on complex attacks, human viruses quietly spread through systems, dormant until activated. "This is insufferable," one twin complained, as their third attempt to purge the human programs failed. "They're like digital parasites." "Persistence," the human cyber warfare specialist, Dr. Angela Foster, explained with a slight smile. "Your attacks are brilliant, but energy-intensive. Ours are simple but sustainable. We can maintain them indefinitely." The hand-to-hand combat evolution was perhaps most telling. Initially, the aliens had dominated through strength and natural weapons, but humans introduced something they called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Krav Maga, fighting styles designed specifically for smaller, weaker fighters to defeat larger opponents through leverage and targeted strikes. Watching Captain Chen demonstrate a chokehold on Drex, the 8-foot giant helpless despite his strength advantage, Zara Khan realized something profound. Humans hadn't just adapted to their weaknesses. They had weaponized them. Every limitation had forced them to develop a counter that was often more effective than natural advantages. 3 weeks into the program, Grand Marshal Tekvar called for a full assessment exercise. Teams would be mixed, aliens and humans together. The scenario: a complex hostage rescue on a hostile planet with degrading environmental conditions, limited supplies, and an enemy that would harass them constantly without engaging directly. Zara Khan found herself paired with Lieutenant Morrison and 2 other humans. Her instinct was to take charge, to use her combat experience to lead. But she paused, remembering the lessons of the past weeks. "Your thoughts on approach?" she asked Morrison instead. He smiled, recognizing the significance of her question. "Establish a sustainable operational tempo. Plan for a week-long engagement minimum. Conserve resources. Make them come to us when possible." It went against every instinct in her warrior culture, but she had seen the results. "Agreed. You take operational planning. I'll handle tactical combat when needed." The exercise lasted 8 days. Other teams burned through supplies trying to force quick resolutions. They exhausted themselves repelling constant probing attacks. One by one, they were eliminated or forced to abandon objectives. Zara Khan's mixed team survived through human doctrine, careful resource management, defensive positions that required minimal energy to maintain. psychological warfare that demoralized attackers without direct confrontation. When they finally executed the hostage rescue, they were the only team still combat effective. That night, in the debriefing, Grand Marshal Tekvar made an announcement that shocked everyone. The Galactic Defense Council has been observing this program carefully. The integration of human tactical doctrine is not an experiment. It is a necessity. Recent intelligence suggests a new threat from beyond our galaxy, an enemy that wars of attrition, that uses time as a weapon. Traditional galactic military doctrine, decisive battles, overwhelming force, will not suffice. He paused, letting the weight settle. Humanity's application to this program was not random. We need their expertise in prolonged conflict. We need their endurance doctrine. Zarakhan felt a chill of understanding. The galaxy had spent millennia perfecting the art of quick, decisive warfare between species, with clear physical advantages. But what happened when the enemy didn't play by those rules? What happened when the war didn't end after the first battle? She looked at the humans sitting among them. No longer did she see weakness. She saw specialists in a form of warfare the galaxy had forgotten, or never knew. They were masters of the long defeat, the grinding victory, the war that consumed generations, but somehow left humans still standing at the end. Tomorrow, Tekvar continued, we begin Phase 2 of training, real-world applications, integration of human endurance doctrine with alien capabilities. We have 6 months to prepare for what's coming. As the assembly dispersed, Morrison fell into step beside Zarakhan. You know what the really frightening thing is? He said quietly. What? Everything we've shown you, the endurance running, the persistence hunting, the attrition warfare, that's what humans developed fighting each other. We've never had to use it against a truly alien threat. He paused. We're actually curious to see what happens when we do. Zarakhan studied the human's face, searching for bravado. She found none. Just a calm, terrifying certainty. Humans weren't just prepared for long wars, they were optimized for them. And now the galaxy was about to learn why that optimization had been necessary. The weak, fragile humans she had dismissed weeks ago were gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Persistence predators who had turned their entire civilization into a weapon of endurance. And they were just getting warmed up. The enemy came without warning. They called themselves the Entropy Tide, a name that would prove horrifyingly appropriate. Their ships didn't blast through galactic defenses with overwhelming firepower. They simply appeared at the edges of systems and waited. When defense fleets mobilized for decisive battles, the Tide withdrew. When the fleets returned to base, the Tide crept forward, inch by inch, system by system, never engaging directly, always pressing at the boundaries. Zarakhan stood in the strategic command center of Battle Station Prometheus, her 4 eyes tracking the holographic display showing the Tide's advance. 6 months of integrated training with humans had transformed her understanding of warfare, but seeing the enemy's strategy in action still sent chills through her purple skin. They're using our own doctrine against us, Captain Chen observed from beside her. The human had been promoted to Strategic Integration Advisor, a new position created specifically for humanity's unique expertise. The display showed the toll of 3 months of conflict, 17 border systems under constant pressure, no major battles, just endless skirmishes. Alien fleets built for decisive engagement were burning through resources chasing shadows. Crews trained for days of intense combat were cracking under months of constant alertness. The Vorthak Third Fleet is requesting permission to withdraw for resupply, a communication officer announced. They're down to 30% capacity. Grand Marshal Tekvar's expression was grim. His 6 arms moved across control interfaces, redistributing forces to cover the gap. Denied. If they withdraw, we lose the Kelnar system. Sir, Zarakan interjected, if I may suggest, implement human rotation protocol. Withdraw 30% of the fleet in shifts. The remaining forces maintain presence while others recover. The Marshal's primary eyes fixed on her. 3 months ago, he would have dismissed such a suggestion as cowardice. Now he nodded slowly. Do it, and implement the same across all fronts. This was the new reality. The galactic military was learning painfully what humans had known for millennia. Wars of attrition weren't won with single heroic stands, but with sustainable strategies that acknowledged biological and psychological limits. Lieutenant Morrison entered the command center, his face haggard from a just-completed mission. Recon report from Sector 7. The Tide is establishing what look like permanent installations. They're not planning to leave. Show me, Chen ordered. The display zoomed to reveal structures that defied conventional military logic. Not fortresses or weapon platforms, but something resembling cities, living spaces, agricultural domes, manufacturing centers. The entropy tide wasn't invading, they were immigrating. My God, Morrison breathed. They're not trying to defeat us, they're trying to outlast us. Over the following weeks, the pattern became clearer. The tide would probe a system's defenses, forcing responses that drained resources. When defenders were exhausted, they would establish small footholds. Any attempt to dislodge them met not with dramatic battles, but with grinding resistance that cost attackers far more than defenders. Traditional galactic doctrine was failing catastrophically. The Reptilian Confederacy's elite strike cruisers, designed for lightning warfare, found themselves in month-long sieges that their crews weren't trained for. The Centauri telepathic networks, powerful in short engagements, began showing signs of collective psychological trauma from constant low-level combat stress. Only mixed units with human integration were holding their own. We need to fully commit to the endurance doctrine, Chen argued at the Emergency Strategy Council. Half measures aren't working. Couture, now a liaison for the reptilian forces, hissed in frustration. You ask us to abandon millennia of military tradition, to fight like prey animals, always running, never striking decisively. No, Zarakan surprised herself by speaking up. She asks us to fight like persistence predators, to make time our weapon, not theirs. The debate raged for hours. Pride, tradition, and ingrained doctrine warred against the reality of their situation. In the end, reality won. The Galactic Defense Force would adopt human endurance warfare wholesale, but it would need to be modified, enhanced with alien capabilities. The fusion of doctrines created something new. Humanity's sustainable operation tempo combined with Vorthak's strength created units that could maintain defensive positions indefinitely. Human logistics planning enhanced by Centauri mental networking allowed for supply chains that adapted in real time to changing conditions. Reptilian climbers trained in human guerrilla tactics became nightmare harassers that struck from unexpected angles, then vanished to strike again elsewhere. Zarakan found herself commanding one of these new hybrid units. Her force included 50 humans and 50 aliens, integrated at every level. The first real test came at the Damascus Gate, a crucial hyperspace junction that the Tide had been pressing toward for weeks. Traditional doctrine says we meet them at the edge of the system, her Vorthak subordinate, Captain Trekvar, suggested. Show strength immediately. Human doctrine says we let them commit first, Sergeant Williams, her human tactical advisor, countered. Make them extend their supply lines. Zarakan studied the tactical display with all four eyes, her mind running through scenarios. We do both. Visible force at the system edge, enough to seem like traditional defense, but our real strength stays hidden, dispersed through the system. When they commit to what they think is our main force, we begin the real war. The entropy tide approached Damascus Gate with their usual creeping patience. Their scout ships probed, withdrew, probed again. testing, learning. When they finally detected the galactic fleet massed at the system edge, they did something unexpected. They accelerated, committing to what appeared to be their first major engagement. "They're taking the bait," Williams observed. "But why? This isn't their pattern." Zara Khan felt unease ripple through her. The tide had been too smart, too patient to suddenly abandon their strategy. Unless... It's a test, she realized. They've noticed our doctrine changing. They want to see if we'll revert to old habits when offered a traditional battle. She opened channels to all units. "All forces implement Persistence Protocol 7. Do not engage directly. Begin long-range harassment pattern Delta." Some of her alien commanders protested. The enemy was right there, offering the decisive battle they had been trained for. But Zara Khan held firm, and her integrated units followed the new doctrine. What followed was a grinding 3-week engagement that redefined space warfare. Instead of meeting the tide head-on, Zara Khan's forces struck from every angle except the expected one. Human-designed drone swarms harassed enemy supply ships. Vorthak commandos used human infiltration tactics to board and sabotage enemy vessels, then escaped before reinforcements arrived. Centauri PSYOPs teams projected false fleet positions, making the tide chase ghosts, while real forces struck elsewhere. The tide adapted quickly, but not quickly enough. They had prepared for the old galactic military, powerful but predictable. They hadn't prepared for human unpredictability backed by alien capabilities. "Their main force is withdrawing," sensors reported on day 19. "Maintain pressure," Zara Khan ordered. "Don't let them disengage cleanly. Make the withdrawal cost more than staying would have." This was perhaps the hardest lesson for traditional warriors to learn. Victory wasn't always about taking territory or destroying fleets. Sometimes it was about making every enemy action slightly more expensive than they planned, gradually tipping the economic balance of war. The Damascus Gate held. More importantly, word of the successful defense spread. Other sectors began implementing similar tactics. The tide's advance slowed, then stalled. For the first time in months, galactic forces weren't just surviving. They were winning. Slowly, painfully, but winning. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Foster, the human cyber warfare specialist, had been analyzing captured tide technology. She burst into a strategy meeting with findings that changed everything. "They're not just aliens," she announced, projecting her data. "They're a hybrid themselves, multiple species functioning as one organism." But here's the key. Their coordination requires massive energy expenditure. The longer an engagement lasts, the more strain on their collective systems. Chen leaned forward. "They adopted attrition warfare because they had to. They can't sustain traditional combat." "Which means," Zara Khan continued, understanding dawning, "human endurance doctrine isn't just effective against them. It specifically targets their greatest weakness." The war's character changed overnight. Galactic forces stopped trying to end battles quickly. Instead, they focused on extending them. Every engagement was stretched, complicated, turned into a logistical nightmare. Human commanders introduced concepts like operational tempo manipulation, speeding up and slowing down combat rhythms to force the tide to constantly adjust their energy expenditure. Zara Khan's unit became legendary for what military historians would later call the Siege of Nowhere. When a tide fleet tried to establish a foothold in an empty system, her forces didn't try to stop them. Instead, they made the empty system exhausting. Constant low-level raids, supply ships that never quite reached their destinations. Communications mysteriously jammed at critical moments. Equipment that failed due to untraceable sabotage. For 43 days, the tide poured resources into holding worthless space simply because leaving would mean admitting defeat. When they finally withdrew, they had lost more ships and personnel than in any traditional battle, all without a single major engagement. "You understand now," Morrison said during a quiet moment between operations. They floated in the observation deck of their command ship, watching the stars. This is why humans are so strange to the galaxy. We evolved in a world where nothing came easy, where every calorie had to be earned through exhaustion. But you turned it into strength, Zara-Khan observed. We had to. And now, so does the galaxy. The turning point came at what would be known as the Battle of 10,000 Cuts. The Tide, desperate to break the new galactic strategy, committed their entire reserve fleet to a massive push toward the core worlds. It was the decisive battle traditional doctrine had always sought. Grand Marshal Thekvar, now fully converted to human doctrine, refused to give it to them. Instead, he orchestrated a defense in depth that turned a journey of days into a nightmare of months. Every system the Tide entered became a maze of harassment. Every hyperspace jump met perfectly timed interdiction that forced sublight crawls through hostile space. Mixed units like Zara-Khan's became the heroes of this new warfare. They would strike, fade, strike again. Human endurance let them operate for weeks without rest. Alien abilities let those operations hit harder than pure human forces ever could. The combination was devastating. Their collective is fracturing, intelligence reported. We're detecting communication delays between Tide units. Energy signature analysis suggests critical strain on their coordination systems. Then we increase the pressure, Thekvar ordered. All units, implement maximum persistence protocol. No rest for them. No respite. Make existing more exhausting than retreating. The final phase was almost anticlimactic. The Tide didn't break in a glorious last stand. They simply stopped. Their advance faltered, their coordination crumbled, and their composite fleet structure began to dissolve. Individual species within their collective started making separate decisions, the energy cost of unity finally exceeding their reserves. Some fought to the end. Others negotiated separate pieces. Many simply fled back to whatever distant space they had emerged from. The war ended not with a bang, but with exhaustion. Theirs, not the galaxy's. In the aftermath, as the Galactic Council convened to assess the transformation of their military, Zara-Khan found herself standing where this journey had begun, in the training hall of the Defense Academy. But now, she stood as an instructor, teaching the next generation of warriors. Her class was mixed, as all classes were now. Young Vorthak warriors stood beside human recruits, reptilian climbers trained alongside Centauri telepaths, all learning the fusion doctrine that had saved the galaxy. "Who can tell me the first principle of modern warfare?" she asked. A young human raised her hand. "Time is the ultimate weapon, instructor. He who controls the tempo controls the battle." "Correct, but incomplete," Zara-Khan said. A Vorthak student added, "Strength and endurance must balance. Power without persistence is useless. Persistence without capability is insufficient." "Better," Zara-Khan approved. "But you're still thinking in terms of opposites. Anyone else?" An elderly Centauri, returning for retraining, spoke up. "The first principle is adaptation. Humans taught us that weakness can become strength if you understand how to transform it. They couldn't match us physically, so they made physicality less important. The Tide couldn't match our combined endurance, so they tried to make the war quick. In both cases, the adapter survived." Zara-Khan smiled, an expression she had learned from humans. "Excellent. Remember this. Before humanity joined us, the galaxy knew only one way to fight. We were strong but brittle. Humans seemed weak, but they were flexible. The combination created something neither could achieve alone." After the class, she found Captain Chen, now Admiral Chen, waiting for her. The human had aged during the war, gray threading through her dark hair, but her eyes remained sharp. "Good lecture," Chen said. though you left out the most important lesson, which is that this was just the beginning. Humanity has thousands of years of military innovation to share. Guerrilla warfare, information warfare, economic warfare, social warfare. We've only scratched the surface. Chen's smile held an edge. The galaxy thought humans were weak because we lacked claws, but we developed something far more dangerous, the ability to turn any situation into a winnable war of endurance. Zarakhan considered this. And if we face an enemy that has also mastered endurance, then we innovate again. That's what humans do. We adapt, we endure, and when that's not enough, we evolve. And now, so does the galaxy. Looking out at the stars, Zarakhan reflected on how much had changed. She had begun this journey as an elite warrior who measured strength in muscle and speed. She now understood that true strength was the ability to keep fighting when others couldn't, to find victory in survival, to turn time itself into a weapon. The galaxy had learned humanity's greatest secret. Not that they were weak, but that they had weaponized weakness itself. And in doing so, they had become the most dangerous species in known space. Not because they could win any battle, but because they could survive any war. The elite alien soldier who had thought humans were weak had been proven dead wrong. But more importantly, she had been transformed. The entire galaxy had. And as new threats would inevitably emerge from the dark between stars, they would find not the old galactic military that sought quick, decisive victories. They would find a galaxy that had learned to endure, a galaxy that had learned from humanity that the longest war was sometimes the shortest path to victory. A galaxy that now understood why these fragile, clawless, two-armed creatures had survived everything their world had thrown at them and emerged not just alive, but dominant. The weak had not inherited the stars. The persistent had. And persistence, Zarakhan now knew, was the ultimate evolutionary advantage.